Good morning, everyone. From the Chamber of Commerce, welcome to Coffee with the Legislators. It's the series where the coffee is free and the content is priceless. Right? No pressure. We're glad you're here, trying to warm up your audience. Okay? Today we want to begin by recognizing our sponsors for this series. That includes our hosts here at the Dickinson Area Public Library, along with Baker Boy and Consolidated. With that, we have Consolidated cameras. They are recording for replay on Consolidated Channel 18. And to help with that recording, we would ask that you would please silence your phones at this time. Thank you. Before we begin, the Chamber wants to make sure you are aware of your next two opportunities to interact with your elected leaders. 2 weeks from today, the series will continue on February 8th, right here at 10 a.m. Confirmed attendees include Representative Vicki Steiner, District 37, Senator Don Scheibele, District 31, and Kirsten Basler, the state's Superintendent of Public Instruction. But before that, the Chamber will carry on a 40-year tradition of Southwest Night with the Legislators, presented by Cord Energy. That will be in Bismarck, Monday, February 3rd, 5 to 8 p.m. Central Time. That event includes a social, a roast beef dinner, and a program including Governor Kelly Armstrong, Representative Mike LaFleur, and an interactive North Dakota trivia game. The trivia categories are North Dakota history, North Dakota athletics, North Dakota arts and entertainment, and Kelly Armstrong trivia. If you think you might have good content for that trivia contest, I would encourage you to write me a note or email me, carter@dickinsonchamber.org. The state is invited to that event, but we kind of want Southwest North Dakota to have the home court advantage for North Dakota trivia there. With that note, we turn to today's program. I will give you the batting order that we will have today. Okay, from the Williston area, joining us statewide and speaking first will be Senator Brad Bekkedahl. We'll bring him up shortly. Batting order after that will be Senator Dean Rummel of District 37, followed by Representative Ty Dressler of District 36, and batting cleanup, Representative Keith Kempenich, District 39. Hour two, we will preserve some time for questions and comments from the public. We look forward to hearing from you. But without further ado, we welcome Senator Brad Bekkedahl on the state's budget.
Thank you, Corey, and thank you everybody for being here. This reminds me of church at home. I always sit in the back pew first, and we got a lot of back pew sitters here too. But thank you for being here. This is a great event. We don't do as much of this in Williston as we should, so I compliment your chamber and everybody here for doing this as often as you do. I chair the Senate Appropriations Committee. I've been in the legislature since 2015, so literally this is I think my 10th year. When Senator Rich Wardner asked me to run for this seat in 2014, I'd never run for a statewide political office. All my experience was local. I was president of the Williston Park Board for 8 years back in the 80s. In 1996, I ran for the Williston City Commission. I've been the City Finance Commissioner there now since 1996, so going on 28 years. So I'm still involved in the local community and local politics as well. But when Rich asked me to run, I told him, I said, well, I never planned on doing this. I'm happy that you asked me to do this, but if I do, I probably am only going to be there for, 4 or 5 years. So if I leave to do other things, is that okay? He said, that's great, do that. Well, every time I've ended my term, people at home have asked me to run again, and so I've never put my name out there because I wanted to be here. I've always done it because my constituents asked me. So I think that's the way it should work, and I'm happy to be there to do that. In my current status, I work with Leader LaFleur all the time. I work with Leader Hogue from the Senate all the time on leadership issues as well as the appropriation side of things. I have a great counterpart in the House. Representative Don Bekkedahl chairs that committee in the House. We meet every day, several hours a day to go through things and keep things on track. It's early in the session. I'm pleased that you have elected Dean Rummel, Senator Rummel, to the post that he's in because he's critical on our Finance and Tax Committee in the Senate. Nobody works harder in the research and works harder to get things done. So I work with Dean a lot in the chamber, so I'm happy that he's there with us as well. What I'm going to give to you today is slides of overviews of the Governor Armstrong budget proposals. So this is we have transitions every time we have new governors in place. So we saw it between Governor Burgum taking over from Governor Dalrymple when I was first in. We see it again now with Governor Burgum leaving and Governor Armstrong coming in. The current governor, the governor before, which was Governor Burgum, starts a process of budget building with all the agencies, strategic planning, and meetings with every agency on their budget starting in April, and they bring a budget to us after those discussions in December. That has happened. So all that research has been done, the strategic meetings have been done, and the budget priorities have been set for Governor Burgum. Governor Armstrong comes in, gets sworn in December 15th. He has his priorities. So what we're going to be dealing with in appropriations is we have a Burgum budget submission and we have an Armstrong budget decision. Ultimately, the legislature decides all spending, not the governor. So these are recommendations we look at. We are going to tend towards the Armstrong budget submissions because he's the current governor. Anything Armstrong doesn't recommend changing is going to stay with the Burgum recommendations. And again, we don't throw it out the door, but we create our own budgets legislatively because that's the process we have in the Constitution. The legislature sets spending, not the governor. So what I'm going to show you in these slides are Governor Armstrong's recommendations based off the Burgum budget that was provided before, and we can talk a little bit about that. I didn't bring any other material with me. I have the slides. I'm going to work off the slides. I apologize for not having printed information, but if you want it, we can get it to you at some point probably. But let's start out with the budget recommendations for Governor Armstrong. We'll hit some high-level things first. So this is the biennial budgets from the state of North Dakota. Major funds by bienniums. We're currently in the 23 to 25 biennium. Our bienniums start July 1st of every year and end in June 30th, 2 years later. So the current biennium, we have three funding sources for state government. We have federal funds, special funds, and general funds. And they're all about a third of the spending. That's how it typically works out, is a third of the spending for each. The federal funds are just over $6 billion. Special funds this biennium recommended are about just under $7.3 billion, and the general fund is about $6.6 billion. The Burgum budget actually brought the general fund spending in at $6.1 billion. You'll see that Kelly Armstrong, as governor, is recommending an increase in general fund spending. That's the area we try to keep down. But I'll tell you from the start, between 6.1 and 6.6, $555 million of that spending from general fund is property tax relief. That's the difference. Governor Burgum did not have any property tax relief built into his budget. Armstrong has prioritized and wants property tax relief. So that's the difference right now. And we'll work through that. Our goal in the Senate was to try to keep general fund spending under the last biennium, which we actually could do, I think, but it's early in the process. We'll have to work that out by the end. Total funds, $19.6 billion this biennium, $19.9 billion. That's about a $300 million increase. Again, $550 million of that is going to be relative to the property tax relief, which we think is the amount of money we're going to spend at this point. So we're going to be a little bit under total spending if we can hold to that. Federal funds are allocated from the federal government. They have specific reasons, and they come with strings attached. That should be no surprise to anybody, but federal funds, when we talk about tax relief, I want to make that clear from the start. When we talk about tax relief, we cannot use federal funds for tax relief in property or income tax in North Dakota. Those are all program-driven. They have frequently state matches tied to them that we have to provide, and they're federal funding for several agencies. We have K through 12 education. We get some federal funds there, 90%, 10% match. Department of Transportation is significant funding for projects to the Department of Transportation, and then higher education. And then Health and Human Services, the Adjutant General. These are all places that federal federal funds typically come into play. And they're big numbers, again, $6 billion. The next funds that we have are special funds. Special funds, I don't know what the next slide is, Corey. If it's special funds, these are funds that come to the state either by fees or costs to patrons for use, like game and fish licenses. You buy a hunting license, that money dumps into the game and fish fund. The state has no control over that. It's totally spent by game and fish. In fact, they're one of the departments that the state has no control of from many aspects because they're totally funded by themselves. So most of the time when the state wants to influence an agency and say, do it this way, we either do it by policy or we say, we want you to do it this way, depending on the funding we give you, they just tell us, we don't need your money. And that's probably a good thing. But anyway, that's a special fund. University fees and tuition, that's a special fund for higher education. Roads and highways, state gas tax at 23 cents, which by the way has not changed since 2005. We can talk a little bit about that. And then workforce safety. These are all places that businesses pay in workman's comp and those things. So those are special funds. Again, special funds because they are dedicated to a specific fee system for a service that's provided, cannot be used for any tax relief at all in North Dakota. These are more special funds: game and fish, water projects, Southwest Water, Bank of North Dakota, mill and elevator, and all those other programs. So next slide, please, Corey. Special funds total $7.3 billion. So these again are going to be fees that you pay. Higher education, tuition and fees, $2 billion to higher education system. Transportation, $1.2 billion. Common Schools Trust Fund. The Common Schools Trust Fund, established at statehood in the Constitution of North Dakota, can only be used to fund school education, K through 12 education. That's how much money the Common Schools Trust Fund, which now is between $6 and $7 billion in its principal, that's how much they return to the state to get to per pupil payments to support your schools. Right now, the state is providing about 80% of the operational costs of your local school district. You're providing about 20% in property tax. You go back 2 decades ago, it was the other way around. 20% was paid by the state, 80% was paid by your property tax. So we think we've made good inroads there. Water resources, oil tax money, Southwest Water, another example, $688 million that's being proposed to spend for water projects statewide. That's all oil money. That's all oil extraction tax money. Human services, oil funds and fees is $461 million that's appropriated, and then workforce safety, $82 million. Those are premiums and fees that are paid. Again, special funds only to be used for specific purposes, can't be used for any property or tax or income tax uses at all. Can you go to the next one? General funds, this is the bucket that we talk most frequently about and we have the most control over. These are from taxes paid for the state. The general fund revenue sources for general fund expenditures. We work off several funding sources. Individual income tax is $880 million. We have had 4 major decreases in income tax in the last 10 years, in some in corporate, but 4 for individual. Currently today, 62% of people in North Dakota that file income tax pay 0 income tax to the state. And Senator Rummel can go over this with you sometime because he's really done the research on it. The highest amount of individual income tax we're seeing right now is coming from, I can't say highest. A great portion of the individual income tax we're seeing today are paid on royalty taxes from oil income that people receive. That's where most of the income tax, because they're at a higher threshold of payment and they're going to pay a higher tax. Our highest tax level is 2.5%, no matter how much you make. Our lowest is 0. Our middle tax level, anything over, I can't remember the number, is 1.95%. But anyway, individual income tax still generates $880 million, even though we have made reductions of about 60% to that in the last 10 years. Sales and use tax, just under $2.5 billion. That's the fund we rely on the most for general fund revenues. When the economy does well, we get more sales tax money. When it doesn't do well, we get less, and we have to adjust every biennium because of that. Oil taxes at 506. You there?
I'm trying to help, but in the short term.
I'm going fast because Rich told me I only had 10 minutes. No. As you can see there, oil taxes proposed $600 million in the budget from Armstrong. Currently, we only take of the roughly $5 billion we take in oil taxes in a 2-year period, we only take $600 million and put it in the general fund to spend. The rest goes to special spending issues. Corporate income tax, $506 million. We've reduced that the last 10 years as well. So again, sales and use tax is our biggest source of general fund revenue. These are the dollars that can be spent for the tax relief proposals we're going to see. The beginning fund balance, the general fund balance, that's when we set a budget at the end of our 2-year budget period, any excess money that was not appropriate, in other words, if we budget conservatively on our expense side or our revenue side and budget the other way on our revenue side, and we get more revenue than expenditures, we have a balance in the general fund that becomes our beginning balance next session. It's estimated to be about $1.2 billion this biennium. Going into this current biennium, it was about $1.2 billion too, so that's a static number. Most of that is because, if everybody has noticed, there's more oil activity in western North Dakota. About 20% of the sales tax revenue the state sees is because of oil revenues out there. The oil field gets busier, they pay more income tax, they pay more corporate income tax, they pay more sales tax. That beginning fund balance is money that we will start the next budget cycle with, add on sales and use income taxes and oil taxes. That's our number for the 25 to 27 estimated revenue sources. Go ahead, Corey, if you can, please. So here's the proposed budget from Governor Armstrong. General fund expenditures. These 4 areas, health and human services, K-12 education, higher education, and public safety, those 4 areas are between 75 and 80% of all general fund spending every biennium. So there's a lot of things that fall in this, but you look at these 4 and they will drive the spending in this part of the budget. Health and human services, $2.344 billion. Most of that money is not programs that the state does, they're federal programs that we require a match to pay into. Medicaid is the largest one, federal Medicaid, anybody in the Medicaid system in North Dakota. Federal government pays 50%. Because we're a state that balances our budget really well, we have to pay 50%. States that don't balance their budget very well are considered poorer. They get a higher federal share. So to some degree, we should not be doing a good job here because it hurts us. But that's our share of the we call FMAP to the federal side. K-12 education, the 1,800, $1.8 billion. That's money from the general fund that goes to pay the $11,000 per pupil payment we currently have to school districts in North Dakota. Higher education, $848 million, just supports the 11 universities and campuses across the state. That's on top of the tuition and fees that they also assess the students. And public safety corrections, $439 million. That number will have to increase this session from prior sessions because we are over capacity at the state penitentiary. When safety and crime became issues in North Dakota, we passed minimum mandatory standards that kept people in prison a little bit longer, and more people put in prison than we had before. And remember, we've increased our state population about 140,000 people in the last 15 years. You have that much increase in population, you're going to see some increase in your prison population. It's just statistics at that point. So we're going to have to do something with that. The current penitentiary is over capacity by about 280 people. They're holding people in county jails because of that. Governor Armstrong has a proposal to try and release a 90-bed pod in Grand Forks that they're over capacity with at a much less cost, lower cost than it would cost us to build new. I think that should move forward. So again, 75% of our general fund. Next slide, Corey. These are Governor Armstrong's proposals for property tax relief. Again, our prior governor, Governor Burgum, who we worked really well with, his focus was always on income tax. And it was on income tax because the state controls income tax. It wasn't on property tax because the only property tax levy we levy at the state level is a constitutional levy for 1 mil that goes to support the state medical center in Grand Forks to get doctors out to our communities. That's the only levy that we have at the state we take. All of the other property taxes are locally controlled, they're locally assessed, they're locally taxed by the mill levies at the local level. So Governor Burgum's response was always, we're not in that game, we don't control it, why do we put more money in to help it out? Governor Armstrong is like, I went around the state asking questions and everybody wants relief from property tax. What we've tried to do in the past was get property tax relief without tying the hands of local officials to how much they can increase their local levies. What we ended up doing was giving them more money. They actually increased taxes at the local level even more, and your taxes continue to go up no matter how much we put into the system. That's why there's discussion this session about putting caps on local levies to try and hold the line on that spending. That's a double-edged sword. It might help to keep your property taxes lower, but it's going to take away local control. And I can speak for that, having been in a local office now for almost 38 years. I see it from that side too. That's going to be a huge debate. And if you have any thoughts about that, get them to your legislators. His proposal is for $483 million in property tax relief and reform, $310 million from the general fund, $173.4 million from the legacy fund earnings account, and he was proposing $1,550 per year for each primary residence. It'll be and then a 3% limitation on political subdivisions. The last thing is going to be the most debated in the session, I think. We'll work out the numbers on the dollars pretty quickly and easily. This amount of money from these sources is sustainable. Unfortunately, Measure 4 that was proposed before was not sustainable. It would have bankrupted every account we have in the state within a decade. And I'm not speaking against that because I think it was a great debate to have. It probably has driven some of this, to be honest with you. But the beauty of Governor Armstrong's proposal, and Senator Rummel, by the way, is the Senate guru on this issue. So ask him questions when he gets up here because he has so much research on this. But what Governor Armstrong is saying is we need to provide a benefit to the public from legacy fund earnings. The legacy fund was initially established to set aside 30% of our oil revenues for future generations for when oil is gone and oil is no longer paying any taxes to the state. Right now, oil pays 55% of every dollar coming into the state coffers is an oil tax. So when that goes away, who's going to make up the difference? That's what the legacy fund was designed to do. But there's also a component of the legacy fund that not only for future generations, we need to take care of today's generations to some degree. That's what this does. In Governor Armstrong's proposal, every biennium we will get more money. The account balance in the legacy fund grows by about $1.5 billion every 2 years. It's currently about $12 billion. You do the projections going forward with oil production, oil prices hold steady, and that $1,550 per year this next 2-year cycle goes to $2,000 per year in the cycle beyond it, goes to $2,500 in the next cycle beyond it. And there will be enough money in the legacy fund so that $310 million from the general fund, the legacy fund will every time pick up a larger share of that. Till at some point, the legacy fund is paying for all property tax relief and not taking anything from the general fund, which is for general government operations. So I think Governor Armstrong did a great job in putting this together. Percent of market value. This is really confusing. I don't want to spend a lot of time in this, but I'll give you what I know about it. The legacy earning funds, as it was originally proposed, the first 7 years, the public passed it in 2010, the first 7 years of interest from that fund by the measure passed by the public had to go into the fund to build the principal. After year 7, the law said that any earnings would dump into the general fund at the last day of the biennium for using in the next biennium. But those numbers were always very inconsistent. Two bienniums ago, we got $850 million dumped in. The next biennium, we were going to get $110 million. So these numbers bounced around enormously. So Senator Wardner, to his credit, who is one of the authors of this, looked at the Common Schools Trust Fund, which is, again, constitutional and it's been this way forever. They take 10%, 5% per year, which is 10% over the 2-year period, and they take those monies off of the principal of the fund. The principal is fund that is determined by 5 years prior to the date of June 30th. 5 years beyond that, they take those numbers of the balance of the fund, add them up, divide them by 5, you get an average balance, and they take 10% of that number. That's percent of market value. So what we passed in the legislature was we said, let's use that same system for the legacy fund earnings. It will be a static number. We always know what we can plan on, and it'll always be there to spend when the legislature needs to use it. So 3.5% per year, 7% is the number. The fund is projected to make 6 to 6.5% per year. So we're not even taking all of the earnings out of it. We're only taking 3.5% per year. And remember, people always tell me it's going to impact the growth of the fund. This fund and this Common Schools Trust Fund don't grow by their earnings interest. They grow by new deposits. The legacy fund, $1.5 billion every 2 years is what they're getting. The Common Schools Trust Fund is now getting between $600 and $700 million new money every biennium from oil royalties. The lands that they have out here in the West generating oil royalties, that's what they're getting for new money. When I came into this session in the early, 2014, the Common Schools Trust Fund had less than $1 billion in it. It's now $7 billion. You can see the growth that we're seeing with those, and that's more money to spend on education. Anyway, so 7% of the market value, so right now, currently, that number in this biennium is about $486 million we get. And we get that money at the end of the biennium, so we already have it in place, and we can't spend it till the next biennium. This is not money we spend thinking it's going to come. This is money we spend only after we have it. So 7%, that's the important part here. Corey, next one, please. There is a proposal from Governor Armstrong to change that percentage from 3.5% per year to 4.25%, still below what the fund is making in interest, so it doesn't touch the principal. His rationale for this is two things. He was supporting a bonding bill to build critical projects in the state, one being a new state hospital at Jamestown. We severely need a facility there. It's over 100 years old now. We severely need a facility there that's going to take care of those people that need to be there. And then there's also a bonding project for a military museum in Bismarck to attach to the Heritage Center. We'll pay for half of that cost, or the state share would be $40 million. And then there's one more proposal, I'm forgetting it. No, it wasn't. There's one more bonding package. There was three of them. Airports, excuse me. Yeah, airports. Thanks, Mayor Decker. Airports. So there's a proposal for airports to get funded out of their projects. So Fargo is currently building an expansion of their terminal, going from 5 gates to 9. They're the largest capacity airport in the state, boarding, I think, 500,000 passengers a year. They would get $60 million. Grand Forks would get $30 million cost share from the state to build a new runway, because they needed a runway upgrade, much like you got in Dickinson a few years ago. And then Dickinson would get $30 million for their new terminal project. So that's $120 million. So Governor Armstrong said, how are we going to pay for that bond? Because you have to have a revenue source. He wanted to take 3/4 of that he wanted to take half of that 1.5% increase and put it into a bond fund to pay for those construction projects. The other 75%, or 0.75%, half of that, would be dedicated to a bucket we currently have in the legacy fund interest earnings. And maybe I should back up and tell you what those are. Last session, we set up spending priorities from that, so we don't have 141 legislators bringing every idea they have every session. The first bucket that gets funded in legacy fund earnings is a debt bucket for water projects that we bonded for in Rich's last session. Was that 2021, Rich? 2021. It was about a $600+ million package. It's $102 million in that bucket every biennium until it's paid off. That's the first thing, we pay our debt. The second thing is tax relief. That's $225 million. The third thing is a $100 million bucket for highway tax distribution. $60 million goes to DOT, $28.5 million goes to cities and counties, 10% goes to townships, and 1.5% goes to public transportation. So that $100 million breaks out that way. Under Governor Armstrong's proposal, he takes the entire 7% money that we have in the legacy fund earnings account and puts all of it to property tax relief and none of it to the highway distribution fund. So his idea, let's take 0.75% of this increase and dump it in the highway distribution fund. The reason you ask why the highway distribution fund is there, because in the Senate, when we crafted this, it was our take that property tax or tax relief was $225 million. The other side that was tax relief is any money we grant to political subdivisions for road projects or road improvements at any level, townships, counties, cities, state, it didn't matter, was going to reduce the taxes you either had to pay for special assessments or the taxes you'd have to pay for a new road to be built in your community. So that was property tax relief in our mind. So that's what his proposal is for that. And you can see the 3 projects for the bonding package. $464 million. Payments wouldn't start till the 27-29 biennium. What's actually happened in the legislature this session is nobody's introduced a bonding package. And our deadline for bills for appropriations are all passed. The only way they can come in now is through a delayed bills process. That may happen in the second half. I can't tell you it won't happen. But right now, what the state has decided, legislature has decided, we'll pay for our priorities with cash. We'll force us to make priority decisions that make the most sense for the state. We'll pay cash for them. If we get in a bind at the end where we have to pay for some things we can't, we may talk about bonding then. But That's Governor Armstrong's proposal. 0.75% to bonding, revenue streams if we need it, and 0.75 for highways. I just went over that. Okay. That's what I went over to, if you can keep going. State employees, Governor Burgum put out 4% increase for state employees in year one and 3% the second year. Governor Armstrong came forward and said 3% first year, 3% second. That's what we've agreed in the appropriations committees to adopt for the first half of the session. In the second half, if it needs to be adjusted based on our revenue forecasts in March, we can adjust them up or down if we think we have the room to do that. State's health insurance program took a 15% increase this year, so every employee in the state that gets a health insurance package gets it paid 100% by the state. That took a 15% increase. There's a proposal from Governor Armstrong to transfer $100 million to the Public Employee Retirement Fund. We're not sure if we're going to do that yet, but that's his proposal. And then continue to move from a defined benefit retirement to defined contribution plan. This is your leader, Representative LaFour's issue. He was the one that made that happen last session. We were in a defined benefit plan, which is a great plan for state employees that stay with the state over a long career because they get a static amount of money based on the number of years and the pay they had in the state system. What was happening, though, was every time the market took a big dive, like in the 80s and 2008, 2009, the state had to put more money in to make up for that loss in market capital. Under a defined contribution plan, it's like a 401k. You put in your match, the state matches your match, you control the investments. It's up to you to make up the shortfalls or take advantage of the gains on the other end if you want to. That's the system we're on right now. But we have to fund the liability the state's accrued from those losses in the markets in previous years, which is estimated at about $1.8 billion. With these changes, we put a bucket in the oil stream for $65 million per year from this per biennium from the state. With that $65 million in what we call an ADEC calculation, which means we're going to pay the premiums into the public retirement system, the defined benefit plan, that's required to get the plan to 100% funding in 30 years. With those two changes, we'll get there in 30 years. We don't need any extra money. That's going to be the debate on the $100 million. Do we really need it or not? It might get us there sooner, but that's the debate. Housing initiative packages. So there's two different packages out there. Governor Burgum had a package. I sat on a task force with Senator Rummel in the interim to talk about housing issues. I think the total package from Governor Burgum was somewhere over $200 million. But Governor Armstrong has some priorities that are a little different than that. So you will see two bills working through the session this year. One from Governor Burgum, one from Governor Armstrong, and we'll work out the details on that. Long story short, what we're trying to do is get more money out there to promote affordable housing building in North Dakota. It's not affordable today. We've all seen what's happened to the valuations. We've all seen what's happened to the cost of construction. I was a contractor. I was apprenticed to a carpenter at age 12. And by the age of 18, when I went off to college, I was building my own houses and selling them and making money. That's how I paid for my education in college and dental school. Working summers, just building homes in Williston. It was great for me. But I was building 1,500 square foot split level homes with 2-car garages for $52,000 and selling them for $70,000 and thinking I made a killing. The contractors today tell me you cannot build a 1,000 square foot house with a 2-car garage for under $400,000 in North Dakota. It's just staggering. That's what this incentive is designed to do, to try and promote more affordable housing across the state. And this is Governor Armstrong's proposal. He's at $104.5 million. K-12 education, every session we're asked to increase the per pupil funding to the school districts. We typically do that when we have enough funds to do it. What Governor Armstrong is recommending, a 2% increase in the $11,000 per pupil payment the first year and a 2% increase again the second year. That's a $60 million cost. There will be a proposal at some point for educational savings accounts. I have to tell you, I know nothing about that side of education. I've always been a public education person my whole life. Don't know anything about the private schools, how they operate, or educational savings accounts. This will be debated at some point in the session. Governor Armstrong is recommending $44.3 million. As I understand it, every child in North Dakota would be allocated a certain dollar amount that they could access. If there's no private school in their community, they wanted to use it to pay for the private school education. They could use it to pay for tutors. They could use it to pay for speech therapists. Anything the child needs to advance that would have come out of their pocket, they could use it for. So ESAs, keep that in mind. And then $75 million for the Foundation Aid Stabilization Fund. That's a fund where the state set up many years ago. Senator Don Shibley from south of here has been real critical to this over the years. And $75 million is what we've been putting in every year to that fund. It's a revolving loan fund, so when your school needs funding, they can come to the state and get a percentage of the funding through this loan fund at 2% interest. It didn't matter when regular rates were 2%, but it matters now when they're 6 and 7%. So that's a cost savings to the public. We're recommending $75 million more to go in there for new school construction projects. And then challenge grants, higher education. So challenge grants are used in many ways. They're used for scholarships at the local level for each of the schools. They're also used for building projects. So the beauty of the $50 million in challenge grants is they require a 2-for-1 private match. So if the state puts in $50 million, the institution has to raise $100 million from the private sector. It's $150 million of impact to scholarships and building projects. We think that's a wise use of dollars to get things done. And it takes a load off of the general fund to pay for everything on the college campuses by doing that. Overpopulation needs, the Department of Corrections is going to be $27 million projected right now. If people are sentenced by the courts to come to the penitentiary system, we have to deal with them, and it's going to cost money when you're over capacity. $43.7 million for human services provider increases of 1.5%. That's what we call DD providers, disabled providers. These are the people that take care of those in your community that are trying to live alone but can't sufficiently without some assistance. The state makes payments to those programs. We call it Opportunity Foundation, Williston. I don't know what your private foundation is in Dickinson. What is it? Able? That's what yours is. That's where this money would go, to help them have people to help those people. And then $17.3 million for child care programs and grants. We never got into the child care arena very much at the state legislature, but we got into it the last 2 sessions because with our workforce shortage situation in the state, we have between 30 and 40,000 openings that we cannot fill every year. The idea was but there was a lot of people we talked to that were capable of being in the workforce but couldn't because of child care issues. We're trying to make a dent in that, help with the child care situation. It might help us generate more workforce for the needs in the state. And then behavioral health programs. These are addiction issue programs. What we have found in penitentiary issues, when Kelly Armstrong was in the Senate with me in 2015 and 17, he led programs called Justice Reinvented. What we learned was we were sending people to our prison system that basically because they had addiction issues. What this is trying to do is correct the addiction issues before they get into the penitentiary system and keep them out of the system and make them productive citizens again. So that's what this is designed to do. These are all programs to support that. And then there's a $40 million allocation from the governor, oil tax revenue for statewide deferred maintenance. The state owns tens of billions of dollars of buildings across the state. You can imagine how much you have to spend on your own house every year just for maintenance, because things where outdoors go bad, roofs go bad, concrete goes bad, something goes bad, heating systems go out. It's the same way at the state. The one thing that the state has done that's been really beneficial to us is they do an assessment of every building at the local level. It's funneled down to Bismarck, a scoring system, and they score systems in 5 categories, from very little need to the highest need. And everything moves through that system. You can understand if you don't take care of the little need and you keep putting it off and deferring it, it just grows bigger and bigger and moves through the system. The $40 million takes care of this highest category of the highest need. Those are critical things like heating systems. So that's in the budget as well. And then the DOT. So the federal funds that come to, we are seeing record amounts of federal funding coming into the state for DOT projects. we have to fund those at a 20% match. So whatever we get from the federal government, we have to provide a 20% match. That's the $171.3 million to federal programs. There's also $85 million from the SIF, or oil tax revenue. SIF is Strategic Investment and Improvement Fund. It's an oil bucket. That's all it takes in is oil money for us to use for special projects. That matches federal discretionary funds. So what the DOT started to do under the Obama administration and the Biden administration was, instead of having formula funding down to the states where we're as a formula funded state, we get the money from the feds government on this formula allocation, we match it by 20%, we spend the money on projects. There now, any new money that's coming in is called discretionary grants. And discretionary grants means the state has to apply for a grant program on a road-specific project that has to meet their criteria of cost benefits. And if it does, they say, now bid into the federal system, how much will you match if we give you money? Well, right now, if you don't match 50%, you don't get any money. That's what this money is designed to do, at least get 50% money access out of the federal government. So $85 million for that. So that was quick and dirty. I apologize, I talk too fast sometimes, but that's the general budget overview from Governor Armstrong. The details you can find on the governor's website. You can find his budget details there. It's one thing is really good for the state right now with our IT department is we have great information resource at your fingertips just by going to your computer, accessing either the legislative website, which is ndlegis.gov, or the governor's, which I'm assuming is ndgov.gov. I've never been there, but because I use the legislative site. But anyway, we have access to that. You can dig as deep as you want to, and remember, as legislators, you can dig into us as well with questions you have. So we appreciate your participation. And if I leave a little bit early, I apologize. It's not that I don't want to listen to the total question and answers, but I live in Williston. I've been a member of the credit union there for 60 years. I have a check I have to deposit. By the time I get to Williston, they'll be closed. So I'm going to stop at your credit union here and make that deposit on the way out before they close at noon.
On the note of digging in with questions, let's go up to 3 questions to Senator Bekkedahl. We'll let him go, and then the second hour will belong to Districts 37, 36, 39. Back to your questions. Questions for Senator Bekkedahl. There we go. Okay. This is for the.
Hi, Jan.
This is for the consolidated broadcast. Go ahead.
Are you cautioning me? Just a quick question for you, Senator, on the higher ed challenge grants that you spoke about. Are you aware of, or could you comment on the Board of Higher Education's position with regards to Governor Armstrong's proposal?
Well, that's a tough question because I haven't talked to the Chancellor of the Board of Higher Education about his proposal. I know that the institutions have always supported challenge grants. The devil is in the details, where it goes and how much it is and how much they're required to spend with it. So it's a good question. I guess I can ask that and you can check with me later. I still have is your phone number changed? I still know how to get a hold of you.
There you go. Okay, next.
Hello, this is Ken Nelson, and my question to you is kind of a softball question. With Drill Baby Drill going to be very effective, and the price of oil going to $50 a barrel because Saudi Arabia is going to help with that, how does that impact all of the information that you just presented to us?
That's a great question. So the legislature has had a tendency since the 2017 oil bust, where we over-projected our revenues from oil and got stung with that. It required us to, we went from the 2015 session with record revenues and expenditures to the 2017 session with record drops in revenues and expenditures. We had to spend our entire budget reserve, our rainy day fund of over $680 million to make the budget come balance that next 17 session. And we had to cut many of the general fund agencies 30% that one biennium. We learned from that lesson. So since then we have been typically under budgeting the price side and under budgeting the revenue side. So if we get more money, it's a good thing. If we get less, we're still in balance. So what we're doing this current biennium is we projected, and by the way, these projections don't come from us. They come from a revenue forecast group made up of the North Dakota Petroleum Council members, which are the operators and drillers in the state, the Department of Mineral Resources professionals that are out there, and the Pipeline Authority, which deals with the natural gas side. They give us recommendations for the next couple of years. The difficulty is you have to remember that they're projecting out 2 to 3 years when they make these projections, so it's always a bit of a crapshoot. But in the current biennium we're in, we projected the first year at 1.1 million barrels per day, which we have been over, and we projected the first year of the biennium $70 a barrel for oil, which we have been over. The second year of this biennium, we saw a drop possibly in the price. We kept the million barrels of oil, 1.1 million barrels of oil. We dropped the price to $62 a barrel. The reason for that is we thought that the oil market was going to soften, and we also saw that North Dakota crude, which is a premium crude product, was getting discounted $6 to $8 a barrel from WTI price because of our distance to the markets and transportation costs. We're still above the 62 threshold. The price of oil in the last 2 weeks has gone from a little over $80 a barrel of WTI to, I looked yesterday, it was at about $74.50 a barrel. We're seeing a slight decline. But because we've underestimated, we will see more money in oil revenues than we projected this biennium, and that's a good thing. It'll come in, we'll spend it next session if we have to. The next session projection that they gave us was for 1.15 million barrels per day because we are increasing production with the new 3-mile long laterals instead of 2-mile. And the price is set at $62 a barrel the first year of the biennium and $60 the second. We think that's still conservative enough to come in overall with more revenue than we projected. But again, it's always a crapshoot when you try to look 2 years in advance. One of the reasons why some people in the legislature think we should meet every year, at least to balance the budget again. We haven't gone there yet.
We'll go here next to Sheriff Corey Lee, Stark County.
Morning, Sheriff.
Morning.
Am I in trouble?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for joining us, Senator Bekkedahl. It's a treat to have you here. A little bit off the topic here, but can you maybe fill in these folks on your sales tax, public safety tax up there in Williams County and the good things that you've done with that?
Oh, sure, yeah, well, I was on the commission when we first came with that. The county commission and the city commission got together in 2013 and started discussing, because of the oil boom, the need for more facilities for fire and police all over our county. And the county commission and the city commission agreed to put a public safety sales tax on in 2014 that I think started in 2015. It's a 1% county sales tax. About 80% of the revenue is actually generated from the city of Williston for that tax, but we agreed we would take half and the county takes half. We took that first 10 years of the sales tax, it actually expired, it will expire in June of this year. We took that first 10 years and applied it to facilities. Williston built 3 new fire stations. With the population growth going from 12,000 to over 30,000 population, the footprint of our city actually tripled. The population tripled and the footprint tripled. We needed more fire stations. We also had to go to a full-time fire department. We were at 30 volunteers before that. We're now at 78 firemen and ambulance drivers. That's a full-time position for the city. So we needed money to pay for that increase as well as the 3 new fire stations. We saved a little money on the fire stations by making one fire station plan with the engineers and architects, and we built all 3 of them the same. We didn't make every one unique or different because that just costs you more money in planning and architectural fees. So if you look around town, if they look the same, it's because of that. But police force went from about 25 sworn officers to 75 sworn officers. Our ambulance went from again, 1 station to 4 stations, so we have to staff ambulances every station. The city took that money, built those facilities, equipped those facilities, and used the balance to pay for the increased operational costs. We were spending before the boom between fire and ambulance and police just under $5 million a year. We are now spending in operational costs for those 3 departments $28 million a year. The public safety sales tax built those facilities, helped us with the increased cost for operations. It generates on average about $15 million a year to the city, $15 million to the county. You might ask, what did the county do with their money? They built new fire stations and equipped them with new equipment in every small town in Williams County. And they also helped bring ambulance services to some of the small towns that were 50 miles from Williston and never had them. And then they built a new jail. We went from 38 beds in our jail to 250 beds because that was what the demand was at the height of the boom. They built a brand new county administrative building because the state court system took so much of our Williams County Courthouse for courtrooms because of the increased volumes. We lost our courthouse. They had to build a new building just for their administrative services. So that's where the money went this first 10 years. We went to the public in 2023 or 24, you'd remember the dates better, Sheriff, and asked the public to renew that. It failed. We needed 60% vote. It got about 58% vote, so it failed countywide. The county went back and had forums with the citizens and said, what didn't you like about this? They wanted an aspect of the money spent on quality of life, not just public safety. They added a quality of life component. 10% of the money from the fund now goes to quality of life on the city side. I don't remember the county side, but they can now spend it on quality of life issues for improvements. Basically, the small towns in the county don't need any new fire stations anymore. They may need to replace some equipment once in a while, but they are really well taken care of. We built a new police station in Tioga with that money. I forgot to mention that. They're well taken care of. The county jail is well taken care of. So there was room in there in that for quality of life expenditures if the public agreed to it. Second vote in, public agreed to renew it. So we now have it till 2035. The money is mainly going, the city side, the money is all going to public safety except 10% to quality of life. In the county, it's still heavily public safety. So I can tell you as the finance commissioner, if we didn't have that money, today we spend that $15 million a year from the public safety sales tax. We spend our entire general fund property tax levy of $5.6 million, generates $20.6 million a year. It costs us $28 million to provide public safety. We still go in the whole $8 million a year. This tax buys us some more time to figure that out. We have asked our public safety departments to bring budgets into the budget discussions for the next 5 years that decrease their budgets by 3% per year for the next 5 years. We just have to bring it back in line. We cannot overspend. And we're hoping that doesn't compromise public safety in any way. But I don't know what we're going to do beyond 2035 because I'm sure we're not going to get those expenses down much more than $20 million a year. It's just a fact of life for all of us. It's sad to say that public safety takes that much money, but it does in our current environment.
At most, one more question to Senator Bekkedahl if we had one. Otherwise, we'll let him be on his way. Last call. Senator okay, we do have one more. Here we go.
Brad, this is Mark Melmer. I think that there was, if I'm remembering this right, there was a little bit of a confusion with that public safety tax of whether it was an increase or added on or whether it was a renewal, correct? Yeah. And that got cleared up and that really helped.
Yeah, so people thought we were putting an additional 1% tax on. Good point, Mark. So what we had to explain to the public is just renewing the existing 1% tax. So it just continues that way. So that was part of the discussion. And I should have asked, Sheriff, where are you guys on that discussion? Because I know you've talked about it down here. Not here anymore. Okay, well, I can tell you from the city standpoint, it has been a blessing to our community to develop those resources needed for public safety. And it's going to be difficult to live without it at some point. I want to get to a point where we can live without it, but this 10 years of grace period is really going to help us out. So, and again, it has kept our property tax levies down because we haven't had to increase. I've heard from people that say just triple the property tax. And I tell them, well, then you come and take my seat because I'm not going to do that. The thing we have in Williston that you have an advantage of too, and this is how I promoted it to the public, one of the only ways we get resources back from the oil industry, we don't levy income tax. The state gets all that money. We don't get corporate income tax. The state levy gets all that money. We don't levy the taxes on the oil industry for the gross production tax or extraction tax. The state gets all that money. The only way we get it back is when we ask the state to give it back to us to some degree. One of the ways we get it back directly is through a sales tax. The oil industry pays sales tax on every purchase that they have in our county. Everything that goes into the drilling rigs, everything that goes into the drill pipe, everything that goes into the ground, they pay sales tax. And they're happy to pay it because guess what? The oil industry workforce is our neighbors that lives in our communities. It helps their people too. So thanks for all the questions. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Good luck.
We're going to go to Senator Dean Rummel next. I'm going to give you a soft cue at 15 minutes and then maybe aim for 15 to 20 so that we have time for 3 panelists. Back to your question. Senator Rummel, go ahead.
Thank you, Carter. I certainly want to thank the Chamber for sponsoring this, and it's an honor to be with you this morning. And it's very difficult to follow Senator Bekkedahl. That's what experience does, and as I listen to Senator Bekkedahl always, it's what I am most fearful of with term limits, because that's what's going to happen. We're going to lose those people that actually have all the experience and a handle on things. And there's no question in my mind, when I have a question, I can usually go to Senator Bekkedahl, and he almost always knows the answer, as you probably heard here. I certainly want to recognize Representative LaFleur, who's with us today, too, to have the leader with us. It's a great pleasure, and both of the representatives that you'll be hearing from shortly here. I certainly am delighted to be with all of you. I serve on, of course, Finance and Tax and Transportation, the same 2 committees that Representative Dressler does on the House side of things. So we have the Senate side here. And I guess what I was asked to probably spend a little bit of time with, of course, is the property tax issue. And we certainly have been working on that for quite a while, a group. There is a tremendous amount of bills that we're going to hear. They're all over the place. A lot of them are separate bills. But what I'm going to tell you, or I guess my opinion is this, is we're going to come out with a property tax reduction bill that's all-inclusive. You can't, this coming week, I believe we're hearing 2 bills on the homestead tax credit. Well, you can't have competing bills. We're going to have to, there's a lot of good ideas. I'm not going to say there isn't a lot of good ideas. There is. But it's trying to get to a consensus on all of this. And so what I'm going to share with you is what I think is probably going to happen by the time we're going to have to address all these issues. And I guess my opinion is it's going to be in one bill by the time we're done. So we're going to be eliminating a lot of these standalone bills. Primary resident credit, you've already heard about it. It's $500, what you're experiencing right now, we're going to $1,550. I'm pretty certain, based on what the governor has done, that it's going to be $1,550. I want you to hear some of the details, though. There's an exclusion of voter-approved levies. And I want you to know all voter-approved levies. So a bond issue that the school issues is a voter-approved local levy. That stays with the local political subdivision. The state will not be paying any of those. The state will not be paying any of those. I want to make sure you're clear, because you will still have a property tax bill if you have a lot of voter-approved mill levies. Let me pick on Fargo, for instance. Fargo Public School District has an unlimited mill levy. I bring it up all the time. They're at 127 mills. Dickinson Public Schools is at 70, while 60 is the state portion of that. By state law, you can't go over 60 unless you go to a vote of the people and they say yes. Fargo did that. Guess what, though? The state isn't going to pay those additional mills from 60 to 127. Fargo Public School District is responsible for that, the taxpayers for that. That's what's called a voter-approved mill levy. There's a bunch of them. Anytime you have a bond issue, you're going to have one of those out there. We already fixed the trust issue for the past. The bill going forward, so Senator Weber's bill passed the Senate yesterday. It is gone. It's got an emergency clause on it. It's going over to the House, and I'm sure that'll be taken care of. And what that did is anybody that had a primary resident in a trust. Now, there's other types of corporation structures that you have. You have LLCs, you have subchapter S's, you have corporates, you have co-ops. We chose not to address any of those. There is so many different structures that you can throw a primary residence into that we found out legally it's going to be impossible to write a bill for all of them. And so we dropped back to the trust. There's 4,000 homes that were excluded due to trust ownership for a primary resident business. So we have to fix this in any bill going forward. We also have a mobile home issue. Mobile homes pay their property taxes in advance. All of us pay in arrears that have fixed houses. Mobile homes, when they pay in advance, the reason they do that is they can hook onto them and leave before the taxes are due. And so we make them pay taxes before. Well, that's a problem when you give them a credit, the $500 credit. The county, if we have any county representatives, they're going to be issuing checks to all of the mobile home users for the $500 that we did because we messed up there. And that's not unusual when you have a huge tax bill. This is a complex area. We will make mistakes. We will make mistakes in whatever we're going to pass this session too, by the way. What's nice is that in 2 years we can fix it because that's what's going to have to happen on any fixes like that. The emergency clause is going to have to be on any one of these because we want the 1550 to be in effect right away. So you're going to see an emergency clause on this. We also are going to require in year 2 of the biennium that the counties have another property tax classification. It's called a primary residence tax classification. Right now there's 4 classifications. We all know there's commercial, agricultural, centrally assessed, and residential. We're breaking residential out so that you have that classification so that we may not have to apply in the future like you've had to apply in the past. If all of them are in a primary resident classification, we will know everybody that's in that classification. We can take care of it a little bit differently, maybe a little bit easier for everybody. And so we're still requiring that 5th classification to be broke out as we go forward. So that's primary resident credit. That's the portion. There's 4 different sections that I would say to any bill that we're going to pass. So that's the first. Homestead credit. The homestead tax credit has been around for quite a while. Last session we took off the asset test. What's the asset test? You don't have to prove what you have in assets. I don't care if you have farmland, I don't care if you have whatever you have, it doesn't matter anymore. You used to have to prove that. You used to have to be under $500,000 and then you'd qualify for the homestead tax credit. If you're 65 years and older right now, you can qualify without the asset test. So what are we going to change there? We're going to raise the income levels, 10,000 from the lower and the higher is what I'm anticipating. So we're going to go from 40 to 50 on the low side, which means that 50,000 and below, 100% of your taxes are paid for. And this is one particular area where we are going to take care of all your taxes, even if they are a locally voter-approved mill levy. The reason you do that is we're trying to keep our elderly in their homes. It's way cheaper for the state of North Dakota in the long term. Otherwise, they become responsibility of the state. If we end up in nursing homes, things happen. And so that was the purpose behind that homestead tax credit. Of course, on the top side, that income level I would anticipate is going from 70 to 80. It may go higher, it may go lower, but that's what I would be guessing. These are all my guesses at this time again. Remember that. We're also going to raise the true and full value from $200,000 to $250,000. What does that mean? So up to the first $250,000 is what we will cover in the homestead tax credit. And it's just because home values are going up, it seemed to make sense to do that. So we are going to raise that level. I'm pretty sure that's going to go up. There is proposals to go up to $300,000. I've read so many of them, I get lost. You would find them very interesting, especially if you're an accountant who likes all these details. I see there's a few CPAs in here. We also have what's called the renter's credit. Many of you don't probably know about that, but renters can qualify for credit through the homestead tax credit. It's always been there. It's been $400 since 2009, I believe was the year. Don't quote me on that. It was way back when. We've not increased it for a long, long time. I took a look at the inflation rate, the consumer price index from that period of time to this period of time, and we proposed that that would go up to $600, and that's what it's going to go to if I, again, am guessing correctly. So that's the homestead tax credit. The total amount of dollars that you saw that Senator Bekkedahl shared with you is certainly what we were working with. It was $310 million out of the general fund to cover the $1,000, and then another $173.4 million to cover the $550 out of the legacy earnings fund. All of that stuff adds up to that number that he showed you. The tax department we were working with from the beginning of time told us that How many residences qualified for this? Well, 134,000 applied for it. Well, how many qualified for it? Well, 92% of the people actually applied for it. There was 8% of the people that did not apply for this credit, which I do not understand why they wouldn't, but they didn't. So we added those homes in. And then we look at new home construction. There's about 5,400 homes being built a year that may qualify for that. We have 2 years, we have to add that on. So we were using 155,000 homes all through up until the day before House Bill 1176 was read in front of the House Finance and Tax Department came out and said, no, there's 165,000 homes that are going to qualify. And so we're ending up revising these numbers, but it depends on what appropriations will do once that bill hits appropriations. I think there's a flood factor, as they usually do. They want to make sure that they have enough. I don't know exactly where enough is. The difference between 165,000 homes and 155,000 homes is a pretty substantial number when you're taking it times $1,550. So we'll see what happens there. So that is kind of the homestead tax credit. The hardest part of all of this is the levy limits, which is the caps. We have a lot of people from political subs in here. What are we going to do? What I'm guessing, as you saw, I know for certain one thing. We will not come out of this session without a cap on political subs. That's just not going to happen. And I hope the League of Cities and the Association of Counties got that loud and clear. I think they have. I think they know that there's going to be some type of cap we have to control. We have to put something on there. So again, it is 3% that we're looking, of course. They can bank, it's up to 3%. They can bank the difference between what they do and up to 3% for 5 years going forward without a vote of the people. And that's just in anticipation. What we're trying to say is don't automatically go up 3% every year, because that's going to backfire on you. We will have another measure for it if we keep doing that type of behavior. Now, one size does not fit all. That is the hard part of this. There are some smaller political subs where 3% is just not going to be enough. And so I know there's amendments being looked at here. I know there's different programs. We also allow what I'm going to see is everybody to go to a vote of the people. If 3% isn't enough, go to a vote of the people, get a simple majority, and you can go higher than that. Originally, I had thought it was going to be 1 year. I'm pretty sure it's going to be 2 years. So they'll be able to do that for 2 years going forward. But I think local control, I am a local control person. I think that's the way to do it. If the people say they want to and they need to, you let them go ahead and do that. And so I think you're going to see that. It has to, though, be at a special or general election. We're not going to allow you to do your own election, is what we're doing at this point in time. So those are kind of the components. You heard where some of the funding is coming from. There is there's a lot of discussion on Governor Armstrong's proposal, and I think his proposal is the right one. You heard it from Senator Bekkedahl. It's where there may be a cap on how far we're going to buy down residential property taxes on a primary. So there's been limits of saying, hey, we'll do it up to $2,000, or we might do it to another number, or it might be a percentage, 75% of your total tax bill. There's lots of ideas here. My guess, and what I would like to see, is let's put a dollar amount, $2,000. And right now, all of the excess coming from the legacy fund, earnings fund, could go towards buying, again, you heard this from Senator Bekkedahl, buying the property tax and also the homestead tax credit amount out of the general fund. Let's get the general fund out of buying down property taxes. It needs to come out of there. We have $225 million that we stuck in there for property tax reduction at the last session. There's another $72 million in homestead tax credit. We need to take care of all of that. And if we could get the legacy earnings fund to take care of that, it will make the most sense going forward for any future legislative sessions. And so I would strongly recommend, that would be my most favorite way to do it. Governor Armstrong actually continues the buy down. He does a 50-50 split after you hit 2,000, 50% going to more property tax reduction, 50% going to buying down the general fund. You know, that's where the plan, that's one of those proposals that are out there. Maybe if we do all of it to buy down the general fund and then continue property tax reduction, and what might happen there, because we can't obligate future legislative sessions, maybe we should be buying property tax on all classifications of property at that point in time. And there is a way to do that. In other words, commercial, agricultural, and centrally assessed also might participate with residential above and beyond that. So now every property classification receives some property tax reduction. And so those are all on the table. I'm not going to say, you know, again, which way that's going to go. The last piece that we really mess up are your property tax notices. And 3 times a year we do this. So you get those with true and full value that gets increases above 3% or excuse me, 10% and $3,000 gets this yellow piece of paper in February or March it is. That makes you really angry because your property just went up, you know, 10% or $3,000, true and full value. So we're proposing that everybody gets that in March. Everybody's going to get, who owns property is going to get, what is your true and full value? What is it? Give you your history. Great, that's fine. On that same statement, let's move up the August stuff. And I know the political subs are not going to like this because you actually have to tell them then when your budget hearings are going to be a lot earlier than what you usually do. But let's get rid of the August one where you're estimating what you think your property tax budgets are going to go up and making everybody mad and get them all fired up. And then you come in December and it's less than that. It's probably not a good deal to fire them up 3 times a year here when we probably shouldn't be firing everybody up 3 times a year. Let's do it twice instead of 3. And that's the proposal. As we are getting ready to the August, in December you'll get your actual statement with what your property taxes are. So that's kind of the gist of what I'm seeing coming out from the property tax bills. I would certainly answer any questions that you would have. Before I do that, though, I want you to watch one bill that's dropping here on Monday, and it's just because it's a local issue. Senate Bill 2269 is Senator Roars out of Fargo has introduced a bill on recall elections. And she asked me if it would be appropriate for me to sign on if she did something for us, because she had some other issues with the recall in Fargo. She said, if the member is recalled and the individual is the only one on the ballot, that the political sub will have the authority to cancel the election before the recall petition and making the recall petition invalid and letting the members serve out the term that they originally had and eliminate all the costs of an election where that's the only person on the ballot. And that to me made a lot of sense. I signed on to that and said, go for it. Why are we spending $20,000 to hold an election in which the person was recalled and there is no other person that's eligible? I suppose they could do a write-in campaign, but that's not going to work usually. It never works. So I want you to watch that one. And certainly I would like any support that you would have for that. We'd like that one to go through because it just seems to make sense. There's a ton of other bills that are coming right now. You'll notice that I think there was 1,600 that were actually drafted. I think 900 and some dropped. Our deadline is Monday. I would guess another 300 are going to drop. I'm just guessing. It's going to be a busy, busy session. So I would certainly entertain any questions later.
Later would be the best time. How about?
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rummel. Next, we welcome new to the legislature from District 36, Representative Ty Dressler.
Well, hello everybody. Ty Dressler. I'm District 36. I live in Richardson. Just wanted to give you a little background on kind of who I am and where I come from. Some of you may not be real familiar with me. So I did grow up north of Richardson on a family ranch. My wife and I are co-owners in a stone mill in Richardson. So it's a grain processing facility on the south side of the interstate, right at the Richardson exit there. So we handle mostly specialty crops like flaxseed, garbanzo beans, lentils, those sorts of things, and a fair amount of organics, and then clean those up and send those all throughout the world. Kind of some background on why am I here, why did I get involved. So I think I was 16 years old, and Richardson had a student Congress team, which is, it's kind of like debate, but we write bills, we go through committees, we propose things, and then we actually go argue them on the floor. Well, we made it to state. We competed against Class A schools, everybody in state that wanted to do it. I believe we won state that year, but the state championship is actually held in the North Dakota State Capitol. So at 16 or 17 years old, I was in the House 1A division, and I got to speak on the floor of the House of Representatives. And I looked around from up there, and I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. Maybe I should do this someday. And well, I guess here I am. So it's been quite a wild ride so far. I'm very thankful for leadership and all the people walking the halls of the Capitol. They've really grabbed us freshmen and put us to work. You know, a lot of people said, "Oh, that freshman year, you're not really going to do much. It's you won't make much of an impact. Don't worry about that till your next one." Well, that is not the case at all. We've been very involved in lots of committee discussions. We've been placed on important committees. And I think, our opinion and our ideas are as valid as anyone else in the place. So I think that's really exciting and encouraging. I just want to touch on a couple of the bills that we've gone through. So I sit on Finance and Tax in the House and also Transportation. And I had a couple specifics to talk about here. House Bill 1096 actually lowered fees for administering the 911 services. So there's admin fees that are charged by the carriers for distributing the funds. And we actually decreased that from 5% to 2.5%. That did pass on the floor. So essentially what it means is $400,000 additional will actually go to 911 services instead of to the companies to administer that program. So that was a good one. 1152 changed the tax rate to residential on lots where you might own a lot and you haven't built a house there yet, but you put a shop or a garage or something like that. Oftentimes you are automatically, because of the catch-all basis of property taxes, it was lumped in as commercial. So it's a slightly higher rate than residential. So that change, I think we'll go through there too. So that's actually going to bring you back down to the residential level if you build that garage and don't have a house on the lot yet to go with it. Others out there, House Bill 1324, might have heard a little bit about that, and that would have allowed income tax deductions for cash and non-cash tips received by food and beverage service employees. There wasn't a lot of benefit to that bill, as you know, and you've heard today that North Dakota does have a 0% income tax rate, up to a pretty high number. So it just really wasn't going to give much benefit or relief to people. So I think it was more of a feel-good bill that really wasn't going to have much impact. So that one did fail. Another one of interest was 1436. Dealing with motor vehicle excise taxes. That would have implemented a graduated rate depending on how old your vehicle was. 5% down to 3%, down even to 1%. There was some discussion on decreasing that to just look at the 1% version for older vehicles, and I think we just kind of ran out of time in committee, so that one did not go through. A lot of that excise tax money is spent on rural roads and those sorts of projects too. So as you trim out of there, it will have consequences in other areas. So I think that was part of the reason of that one not going all the way through. Let's see. Kind of an interesting one was House Bill 1343. And that would have essentially, it was trying to address some of the Measure 4 concerns that people had with if they don't pay their property taxes, do I ever truly own my property if somebody can go take my house away from me? So that one was really an interesting perspective on how to address that. It would have put the county or other lien holder essentially to the highest position possible to get paid for back taxes, but you would not be able to remove people from their homes. Lots of concerns there, as you can probably imagine. How do you make sure people anybody pays their property taxes? So we heard a lot of testimony on both sides of that. There was a 12% interest compounding every year if you didn't pay your property taxes. So essentially, at the end of that, whenever that person would move out, essentially the home would still go to the county. So I don't know that would really address the concerns that it was trying to. Another one we just heard was 1244, and that was allowing a $10,000 North Dakota income tax credit for homeschooling expenses. That was amended to $1,000 in committee. Also, a bit of a feel-good bill, really isn't going to have a huge impact one way or another due to the lack of North Dakota income tax paid by the majority of our citizens. So we'll see how that one goes on the floor. Right now, I think at committee it sent out as amended as a 8-6 do pass. So there will be some discussion on that one, I'm sure. Not going to touch on property taxes too much. You heard about a lot of the details of 1176. I guess we talked a lot about homestead tax credits too, and my perspective on that is, after talking to local political subs and a lot of people involved in it, it really is a great program. It works really well. Everyone likes it. I think it's important to keep it focused on who needs it most. Make the adjustments necessary, but don't blow the doors totally wide open on that thing, and really try not to water it down or make it too broad, because I think it's a great program and it's working well right now. So, taking a methodical, steady look at increasing where needed with maintaining the integrity of the program is kind of what we're looking for there. You heard about 3% caps. There was another one that would be a 3% limit or CPI, so Consumer Price Index, whichever is lower. So it would be 3% would be the max, or as low as maybe 1 or 2% if CPI was lower. So that was another interesting twist out there. We've got there was a talk about a $60 million buyout of residential property and not doing some primary residence tax credits. Other bills might incorporate a 10 to 20% reduction in ag land property taxes. I think it's important to remember ag land it's slightly different than commercial property. As you're growing a crop out there, you really don't have any control over what you sell it for. So, commercial has a bit more opportunity to pass those increased costs of property tax on to the consumer, whereas agriculture doesn't as much. As you know, agriculture does have a lot of other good things working for it with how those taxes are calculated. So just another interest or perspective there to consider. As you can see, I think that, property tax, it's incredibly complex. The methods that we use for relief can influence voter behavior and market behavior. So as a state would lower what the individual pays, it can lead to other issues. All these things are being considered by the people in the Capitol. So it's really a far-reaching influence there. And I would like to see, encouragement. I want to keep and encourage the public involvement at your local level. This is where the taxes come from. This is what we're choosing to offer. And if the legislature has to step in and look at capping things, what does that mean for services provided? Well, it's going to mean something, right? At some point in time, they're going to have to look at where do we cut, how do we cut, or how do we ask the voters for additional spending opportunities. So Another kind of interesting one to get off the boring subject of property taxes would be not paying capital gains on gold bullion. So that one's still in committee, but it was kind of an interesting one I wanted to throw out there. Moving on to transportation, of local interest here, House Bill 1093 increased the days of use for restricted CDLs from 180 to 210 days for ag businesses and like custom harvesters, people out spraying crops, those sorts of things. So that was really, I think, an important step there. People are bumping into a window where if they did a lot of work in the fall, then they couldn't start right away in the spring. So we cleaned up some language there and expanded that possibility quite a bit. House Bill 1250 dealt with driving infractions of 2 points or less. 2 years ago, I wasn't there, but I don't know what these guys did, but they changed it so that those 2 point infractions were now reportable to insurance agencies. So insurance companies said that if you allow us to take a look at the 2 point or less infractions, we can provide for a greater disparity between what we're paying, the good drivers versus the bad drivers. Well, insurance companies came in and testified against this bill, which would actually go back to the way it was where we don't report the 2 point infractions to the insurance companies. So they came in, beat us up pretty hard. We fought back. So that one did pass on the floor 86-5. So the 2 point violations would not go to the insurance companies. They really weren't able to provide us with any solid numbers saying that it changed, that it did it. Everything still went up. And if you look at your insurance bills the last 2 years, they've been pretty crazy. So we pushed back there, and it looks like that one should slide through depending on what the Senate thinks of it. Another wild one you probably saw on the newspapers was 1298. That did go through, and that is an 80-mile-an-hour limit on the interstate. There was a different one out there, 1421, that would have imposed a 40-mile-an-hour minimum speed, which would obviously impact agriculture and tractors and that sort of thing. So then they established a fee, which would allow tractors to still drive on the interstate if needed, but the farmers would then have to pay an annual fee per motorized agricultural equipment to go on the interstate. So as you can probably imagine, the rural folks did not appreciate that one very much, so that one did have a do not pass out of committee on there. Some of the cool opportunities on transportation is a recent development of where we're naming bridges after fallen service members that have given their life for us, and we get to hear the testimony that goes along with it, and a lot of times it's incredible stories of heroism and sacrifice really that the individual and the families have made. So it's really kind of neat, and I guess of local interest, the South State Avenue Bridge will be named the John P. Fedek Iraq Bridge. Then also through House Bill 1173 would be Highway 31 Bridge, New Salem, north of New Salem. There would be the Specialist Dennis Furter Jr. Bridge. So we got to hear stories from family and interested parties there, and it was really touching. And I think it's a great way to honor those people that have served. I do have a bill coming up, 1509. And that's relating to fees paid to the Oilseed Council as a producer and the process for refund and how would you get your money back if you choose to not participate in that sort of a checkoff program. So lots of bills, lots of numbers. It's been a wild ride, but I really appreciate it, and I do like hearing from constituents. So please reach out over email, phone call, text message, whatever you want to do there, and try to let me know where you stand on certain things. So I appreciate it, and thanks everybody for coming.
as we welcome Representative Kempenich, who has traveled a long way to be here. You'll have 15 uninterrupted minutes. What you're going to see from me at 11:45, I will be looking for show of hands to see where my questions might come from in the audience. That will help guide the remainder of our time together. But go ahead, Representative Kempenich.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. This is, for record, I shouldn't say for the record, but my name's Keith Kempenich. I'm a resident of Bowman County. We live 18 miles southwest of Bowman, or 13 miles southeast of Rame. It's great to be in North Dakota. You look around us, other states, they're running into budget issues. North Dakota has the ability, we have the resources to do a lot of what we need to do and some of the stuff that we want to do. I think that the main thing that becomes a challenge, though, is managing it. When you have money, it's hard to say no. And that's where we're kind of at today, is where we're prioritizing what's important, what to move the state forward, and how to look at how we treat everybody relatively equally. You're never going to get to that, but it's a goal that we've been trying to do. One of the things that we're seeing, and I sit on appropriations and vice chair of House Appropriations, what we have on our side for this session, or for this half, is basically the big ones is human service and K-12 funding, DPI. And those two budgets make up just about half of what the state of the $19.9 billion, those two budgets make up just about half of that budget. And that's what becomes a challenge, and how do you do it, and how do you provide services? We've been trying to streamline human services, and I don't want to get into a lot of details, but last session we block granted the FTE, and it wasn't just the dollar amount, it was the numbers too. But they came back in with 109 new ones that they didn't even talk about 2 years ago. So that's the debate right now. I like block granting to that because we don't want to micromanage those types of agencies, but there's got to be some accountability with that too. So that's one of the debates on the human services. The K-12 funding, Senator Bekkedahl kind of hit on what the increases are. We're going up over $12,000 per student, getting rid of the mandatory minimums. It's going to be interesting to see how that works, because I know a lot of our areas out here, school districts have been using those minimums to kind of balance out the budget. But as the K-12 funding goes up, that should equal out what is required to educate a student in North Dakota. I think one of the things, and that ties into the property tax conversation and everything else on this, because most rural counties, their highest mill levy is K-12 funding. The county government is usually not that big of a deal. The larger counties, it takes probably second or third place in that as far as that goes. But one of the things that we've been trying to do is equalize out the K-12 funding, so it isn't impacting the schools across the state. The other thing that we've been looking at on the House side is we set here this last week. We set the revenue forecast. And it's kind of interesting when we talk about the monies that are going in and out of the state. The traditional tax dollars really make up a very small portion of the state, of the contribution of revenue. Right now, what we did is we set the general tax, and that's sales, personal, corporate, and motor vehicle tax. And we set that at $4.24 billion. We just kind of split the middle. There's two forecasting agencies. OMB uses economy.com, and we use S&P Global. And the S&P Global was higher, but we just split the difference, came up with the $2.4 billion. And so that's what we've basically been doing there. And you've gotten into, it was brought up by Senator Bekkedahl. I was just going to use an example of like Game and Fish. They're 100% special funding. It's through their license, but then they got the Pittman-Robbins Act, which provides us all taxes on hunting gear, ammo, anything really to deal with hunting, that's that tax. And then there's a Dingle Johnson, which is fishing. Your fishing poles, your anything with fishing, and that's a federal tax, and they get a portion of that. And that's just one example, though, of a lot of agencies that you don't touch in this. There's a bill in, and here's another example of a special funded agency. It's a financial institutions agency that basically they regulate the banks. The banks pay the fee. The banks got a board of governors. So we've basically let them here this session run their own shop. There's an accountability section in there, but that's something that we've decided that let them run their own operation and give us a report. And that's just another example of that. And they fund enough of it so there's no state tax dollars involved in it, but it is the regulation of the banks. I just on another one that was touched on. There isn't much to talk about. Senator Bekkedahl and I wasn't going to talk about the tax issues because we've hit those, but I wanted to touch a little bit. And the state got involved in property tax in 2005. And it's been a battle ever since, and it was brought up about the caps. The only thing we've been seeing is what we've done for the last basically 20 years with property tax is it works for maybe two years, 4 years on the outside, and then it just starts climbing up again. And so, and we don't levy it, so we don't control it. You folks, local participation is one of the things that does control it. But that's been one of the problems too, is when in October, when local political subdivisions set their budgets, it usually gets, some places are a little more active. I was in our county budget here last year, and I was the only one in the room on that first meeting they had in October, other than the county employees that had some interest in it. So participation in this is probably kind of a key too in this. It's not just regulating dollars on it. So that's one of the issues that I wanted to touch on there. And the other thing I wanted to touch on too was legacy fund. That is becoming a very important fund, not just on the earnings side, but there's been mandates to invest in North Dakota, which the complications get a little more interesting in that because you're talking about the principal part of it, not the earnings, and we got to be careful how we do that. And it's not windmill money, and so we've had a challenge on that. What we've done now is we've set out $80 million. We've laddered out $80 million a year for the next 10 years. We're basically, with the CD match program that the bank has, coming out to about $1.3 billion to invest in North Dakota. And a lot of that, while the bank has committed quite a bit of their $500 million, and 50 South is our agent in town or in the state for $100 million of it we've allocated. And truthfully, now we're looking for another manager to get into bigger type projects, because that's what we're kind of looking at, because we're really limited when you think of North Dakota and invest in North Dakota. We've got a lot of different funds out there for small startup, but this isn't startup money. This is a company that might have been established 10 years ago that has need. They got a growth agenda, and it's venture capital, but there's a fine line between what we're looking at and what a lot of people that have good ideas are coming to us for. But that's been a challenge with the legacy fund, and we're seeing bills show up this session too, which are a little bit frustrating because they want to tie up the earnings end, which isn't a problem per se. That's been through the wash already. But they want to get into the corpus of the fund for different things too, and you can't have a good earnings and then start tying up long-term 0% returns or no return, or actually losing principal on ideas going forward. So that's going to be a challenge. There's 3 bills that I'm going to testify against probably this next week that are trying to do that, because I think we need to, for the state, we need to look at the earnings, because we're, in a lot of ways, we're following right what Alaska did. And it's hard, like I said earlier, when you have these kind of revenues, this kind of resources that are coming in, most of it's natural resources, you can take care of all the taxes, But if people don't participate in it, it becomes a problem. And that's where you become a trust fund kid, basically, and then who's responsible for what? And so that's been one of the challenges, I think, that we're facing today and going forward. It is amazing, though, that it was brought up by Representative Dressler, that the amount of bills that have come forward this session. Everybody's got a good idea. Some of them are probably repeats. We had a bill the other day on naming a state rock. It was Little Knife Flint. We already got the state rock, which is a Little Knife Flint. And so there should be, I had an email the other day and I get a resolution in, we got till the 28th, but it was brought up by, maybe we should research before legislators introduce bills, maybe they should do some research if there's a bill already, or get rid of another bill before they introduce another one, because you're going to see, as this changes with the term limits, you're going to see a lot of new people come in, good ideas, but maybe you should research what you're doing and how you want to do it. You don't necessarily have to introduce a bill when you go up there. I mean, you do if you got a good idea, but you're finding out that you don't necessarily have to introduce it. And truthfully, on appropriations, and that's getting harder, I've always operated on amendments, introducing bills for, but then you get the policy committees to get after you for that. And but that's kind of how it operates, is because you're sitting there. Well, policy drives money, and money drives the policy, and usually they got the policy coming forward, and then they try to figure out how to fund it. But it does make it kind of interesting on how the interactions work, and so that's one of the things that we're looking at as far as making this session work. Representative LaFleur, he's been running around here this last week, I think, trying to figure out, well, it's been mentioned in the past, it's like herding cats. And I think Representative LaFleur is figuring that out, that it's probably easier to herd cats. But that's right now where we're at. Like I said, a lot of the subject matter's been talked about. But I'm just going to let the people in the audience interact with us, and I'll just shut it off from there. But I'd just like to thank everybody for coming out. Thank you.
If you have a question about the state rock or about any other topic, I would love for you to show me your hand. Now I'm giving you a card from a deck of cards. That's my way of putting you in line for a question without actually having to stand in a line. Okay, so show of hands. Who might have a question? And then this is consolidated. It'll go to Mr. Fitterer here first, and then we will form the line after that.
Thanks, Carter. Chris Fitter, reside in New England and with District 39. Couple bills that have affect us. I'm a board member of the North Dakota Petroleum Marketers Association and the state director for the Energy Marketers Association on the national level. I think it's House Bill 1382 with the gas tax. Looks like it's going to be trying to raise 3 cents. And obviously, we as a group with the petroleum marketers are not in favor of any gas tax as of right now. It looks, and then we also have on the convenience store side, and I'll let Mr. Sheeler talk about that a little bit later if he wants to, but a hefty cigarette and vape tax also. Two things I see on that is it seems to me that with the property tax relief or what we're going to try and find some sales tax and what I call a business tax. And it seems like there's going to be quite a few bills trying to do that and run it through to make the retailer and collect basically the sales tax. It's going to get passed down to the consumer. We're not in favor of basically raising any sales tax or anything of that nature. I think there's enough money in the coffers right now to cover the 3 cents on the gas tax. I know other states have higher gas tax, but they also don't have the budget or the income that we have either. Look at Wyoming, who has much less than what we are. I think they're at 9 cents. We're at 23, I think, or wherever right now. To go back on that business tax, last legislature, we also had a chance with our credit card fees the way they are. it also just makes us actually lose money when we're collecting more tax. And you guys had a chance to, with the credit cards, look to eliminate any fees on credit cards for the retailers to, when we collect state tax, it would be 0 fees. That did not go out, I don't think it went out of committee even, I'm not sure, but I know it didn't pass or go along with that. Any credit, and now on the national level, MasterCard and Visa, Senator Durbin and Senator Marshall out of Kansas have a couple bills out there, and there's some real action going on to credit card fees on the national level. So also just question on the $50 million for the housing. Does anybody can give me some details on who qualifies, what qualifies? Because also City Council of New England, but we have housing shortages. We don't have really great housing. And I think in small towns, sometimes when you try to attract people to our small towns, housing is a key to having people move there. Good housing. And I'd just like to know if there's ways to build houses in small towns to this part of the credit, or how do you, Rich, I don't know, anybody else or Mike, or having any idea on that 50 million? I'd like to. Okay, we'd like to look at that somehow, some way. Thanks for your time.
This housing goes to Housing and Finance, and then they're the ones that leverage our money on top of, there's federal programs too. There's different levels of what, a lot of it's multi, and I don't know if we need that. The biggest problem you run into when you do something on a statewide basis, it usually goes to the larger cities, and that's been a problem from the get-go. I had here a couple, 4 sessions ago, we did split it, where those over 12,000 and those under 12,000 to do something, but it gets, I mean, it's a statewide issue and it's a statewide problem, and so to specifically get into detail until we get the bill, until we get something hammered out on it, I'm just saying what we did and what's happened in the past with this housing initiative, and a lot of times it goes to multi-family housing is where a lot of it winds up at. And so, like I said, when you're looking at single unit, that gets there's programs out there, but state doesn't really get deep into that, and I don't know, they might on this one, but most of the time it's multi-family or multi-unit housing is usually where this winds up. And like I said, I don't know the details of what's being proposed right now on this, but I'm just telling you what happened in the past. And if you want, we can talk a little bit about the gas tax. I'm not in favor of it. It's kind of interesting, the dynamics that happen. I mean, DOT would like to see that on that, and we are running into some issues, because this is probably, and it was brought up the other day, about kind of how parochial some of the bills are becoming up there in the state. We've got a lot of urban, rural, and division type conversations, and I don't like to see that per se, but we are seeing that. And with the DOT, it was brought up about the excise tax. A lot of the legislators, the rural legislators, are looking to the excise tax to fund more and more of their issues out there. And so that is becoming a bigger conversation, because as you take away the DOT, we want to make sure that we can meet the federal match at least, and that's been a challenge in the past. And now with the new model that Senator Bekkedahl brought up, and it is a different model, that you have to come up with about 50% of the funding before you even can get into this granting round. And then you got other issues. Even if you come up with 50%, they got road use. I mean, there's a whole litany of it. We're dealing with that on 85 right now. And truthfully, 85, most of that money's been built with the state dollar. We haven't had very little federal dollars gone into that. This last 50 million we got, and hopefully this next $50 million grant to get to 200, half of that was paid for the feds, but we still got 102 million to get to the top of the hill. And from where I don't know if anybody's been up on 85 on the bridge there, but we got, it's 102 million to go 6 miles to get to the top of the hill up there, and that's more than likely going to be all state dollars before we get done with that. So it's just, there's a lot of dynamics. When you get into it, we could spend the rest of the day on this, but that's why I just wanted to touch on that.
There's 2 cigarette tax bills coming through. The Senate will be hearing one this week. That's Senator Hogan's. And of course, Representative Steiner has the other one coming in from the House. I don't know when that one's going to be heard. They're both competing with each other. They're both very different. I looked at both of them, and there's a tremendous increase. We're talking big increases here. It's like almost 80%, I believe. And if I can touch on the credit card issue from the last session, that is a difficult situation because the credit card companies obviously are worldwide. And when you try and break down sales and use tax into a separate category, they could just drop the state of North Dakota off because we're such a small, little itty-bitty market. And when we do that and try and dictate to all your credit card companies, many of them have talked to us or did talk to us, and it's very challenging to get them to change all their software systems to do exactly what we want there. That is going to be another heavy pull this time around. I imagine they've already started through the bankers and already started talking to us and putting a lot of pressure on us that's probably going to be a very hot topic again when it comes to the floor.
Just a side note, the state of Illinois did pass. I know, it's coming.
Yeah, I think what you need is the state of California, the state of Florida, and the state of New York. My opinion.
Yeah, a lot of dialogue can happen outside of this, 2-hour session. We've got at least 3 more questions in the audience. I want to go here next.
Thanks, Carter. Mary Massa, District 39. I'm speaking, I guess, both as myself and as president of North Dakota Water Users Association. There's 2 bills on cloud seeding, and it would be 1514 and 2106. They're both to ban cloud seeding in the state, which I think is a wonderful program, and it's going back to local control.
Members, weather modification, and it's been in the state for, I think the state started getting into it in the late 70s, early 80s. And what it does, there's 2 districts. You got Bowman County, and you got 3 townships in Slope that participated in the southwest part of the state, and then you have Williams, McKenzie, and Montreal. Ward took it out here a couple of years ago. The ones that are Genesis now are basically in the northwest, or that District 1, I think, as they call it. They're trying to do away with it. I've always had talked to Darren, is the one that runs this program. When you get into these, and it does get to be a problem because of the foot that's gotten smaller, and when you're doing this, it's not just you can't just isolate it, and so there's a push to ban it. It does work for hail suppression. I don't know so much about the water, but that's another debate, but it does work for hail suppression on it. And one thing, a little side note on water, I was going to bring, we got the water budget too, and that's no small issue. And I was talking to Fargo, one of the Fargo engineers on their ditch and dike down there and stuff on it. And I said, water, I was arguing with him on some different aspects in committee. And afterwards I told him, I said, water finds its own level. And he says, downhill and towards money. And so if you wanna argue about water, that's basically where it goes.
Mary was about half complete with her thought there. We'll let you follow. No, that's okay. We'll let her follow up.
Okay, thank you. So a no vote, please, both on that. I believe in cloud seeding. My other one, I believe it's House Bill 1141, which is, I think, before committee this coming week, and that's to deal with organizations such as North Dakota Water Users, League of Cities, League of Counties. I don't know what the correct term would be. I'm going to say to punish them for supporting Measure 4. And we were very careful not to use public dollars to do that. So there again, I'd urge a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I heard Mike Schatz chatting the other day about maybe going back to, so it's not what you guys discussed today, but going back to the plan of having everybody in the state register as a Democrat or a Republican. My thoughts on there, and I'll just tell you, you don't have to answer it or anything, but my thoughts on that is it's a gross waste of money. We're such a small state. Most of us here are not trying to cheat the system. I think by the time you're done with that, the amount of money to chase one or two bad actors is probably not worth it. So that's my personal feeling on that. So just throw that out.
District 39 is the only district in the state that has an entity that has to register or has to declare, and that's the city of Medora. They have to register. I don't think we haven't seen big problems in this arena. I think it would create more bureaucracy in the process of this, so I'm not in favor of putting this in front of the state, but it's, there's a debate going on. I mean, we were on a bill a few years ago too about local political subdivisions, commissioners and city commissioners declaring, it was an option, and that didn't go very far either, so I don't think the state is really interested in doing that, but we'll see where that goes. So I just thought, since we're the only city or the only place that registers.
Oh, I did, but it's totally different. Dean is the one that inspired this question because he had a problem figuring out how to give corporations a tax break. I own several corporations that would love a tax break. But instead of giving me a tax break, when my bill comes in for my taxes, and I can look at that, and then Rich, of course, comes and sees me for a donation to some organization he's chasing. How about, just to throw this out, and you guys can think about it or hate it, whatever you want to do, is that if I give a few dollars to some great organization, how about you let me reduce my property taxes by the amount that I gave to a local 501c3? It's real simple, easy, it doesn't save me any money, but it might make me feel better.
Respond or not as you see fit. Go ahead.
I hate to respond to this, but the reason I would is just the mechanics of it. When you look at the mechanics of doing something like that, you have all these political subs that are dealing with property tax, and how do you actually manage that? There might be a better way to do it, and it would have to come through the income tax side, corporate income tax side of things, that you'd probably want to take a look at. But certainly would be interested in any wonderful solutions you have for that, Ken. We would definitely listen.
Next question comes from the pride of Billings County.
James Oderman is my name. I live in District 39. And two questions that I would have. First question would be Senate Bill 2097, and I would ask Dean to comment on that. Has to deal with a rural endowment fund. I think they're thinking about putting $50 million in this account. Strengthen North Dakota Executive Megan Langley is the one who's promoting that. And then the other question would have to do with 1491, the bill to kind of legislate the High School Activities Association relative to transfers and athletic and extracurricular activity. And I would ask the Representative Dressler and Kempenich to comment on those, please.
Well, the 1491, that one of transfers, I read a little bit about it. I'd like to see what the discussion is. I was struggling to understand what they were trying to do with it, and maybe you can enlighten me a little more if you got a big opinion of it, Jim, because I don't know what they're trying to solve, I guess, with that one. I do. It is. So that's, like I said, I just thought I'd throw that out there because I'd like to hear your opinion of what you're thinking of.
Well, I'm asking because I wanted to hear your opinion on it.
Well, I don't have one. That's the problem. I'm trying to figure out why we're dealing, trying to deal with it, I guess, is the biggest thing. It is. Go ahead if you want.
All I've heard on that one so far is basically from the groups that oppose it, and their concerns were that this would really open it wide up, like wide open, to the point where your team loses in districts, you go rent an apartment in the winning team's district, and like you jump on and play regionals and state championship with your new team. So it would really make it wide open. So I know that's one of the concerns with it. What they're trying to accomplish with it, I'm not really sure either.
I hate to take the same route, Mr. Oderman, because mainly I haven't heard that bill and I haven't seen it yet. And of all things, nobody's contacted me on that one yet. And believe me or not, of the 900 or so bills that dropped, I probably, if I was contacted, wouldn't remember at my age anymore. So you would be the person that could certainly influence that. I would love to hear your opinion on it. And when it comes to the floor, to the committee, I would be happy to be informed by someone like you. Thanks.
Sounds like opportunities for side conversation or follow-up there. I think I got to every hand in the air thus far. This would be last call for questions. Okay, well, as we wrap up here, please let Trace's boss know that he worked overtime today, and so did I by a few minutes. Yeah. We'll be in Bismarck Monday, February 3rd, Southwest Night with the Legislators. Great program there. We'll be back here Saturday, February 8th, Coffee with the Legislators. Thanks for coming, everybody. We'll see you next time.